Okay. Let me call to order the council meeting for June 26, 2023. If you are able, please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Clerk, if you'll please call the roll of the members.
Judy Hutchinson.
Present.
Amanda Weaver.
Here.
Janice Hoppy.
Present.
Mr. Stites.
Present.
Mr. Ohm.
Here.
Leah Dozeman.
Here.
Rachel Haltine.
Present.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, we have 7 members of council present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll go to approval of the minutes. We have no minutes today. Approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda? No? Then we have one. Is it on? Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right. If I can have the Parks and Recs staff join me up here. We got a good group this evening. Our proclamation tonight is a proclamation about Parks and Recreation Month, July 2023. Whereas Parks and Recreation programs are an integral part of the communities throughout this country, including the city of Wheat Ridge. And whereas Parks and Recreation promotes health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks. And whereas Parks and Recreation promote time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being, and alleviating illness such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas Parks and Recreation encourage physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, swimming pools, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas Park and Recreation programming and education activities such as out-of-school time programming, youth sports, and environmental education are critical to childhood development. And whereas Parks and Recreation increase in a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas Parks and Recreation are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community. And whereas Parks and Recreation are essential for adaptable infrastructure and that makes our communities resilient in the face of natural disasters and climate change. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide the place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the City of Wheat Ridge recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now, there it be resolved, I, Corey Stites, Mayor Pro Tem of the City and Wheat Ridge City Council, do hereby proclaim July 23rd as Parks and Recreation Month in the City of Wheat Ridge. We're going to give this award or this proclamation to Karen O'Donnell and her staff. Do you have a few words?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites. I figured I could talk about, the various projects that we're working on from Prospect. We've completed Prospect Park Phase 2. We're approaching a Tabor Lake Trail project, and we have many, many, many others. But I decided not to do that. We could talk about our challenges, like lifeguard shortages, graffiti in the parks, but I decided not to do that. Our accomplishments, like our Colorado Lottery Starburst Award for Prospect Phase 1 and 2, or our Colorado Parks and Recreation Association Award for Regenerate Wheat Ridge, or the fact that we were selected as one of the 20 nationwide sites for a Leave No Trace Spotlight event, but I decided not to do that. I decided this time we were going to focus on the people. And I have a lot of wonderful people here today, and I will try and keep it brief, but I want to speak to each one of them. So Joe Beezer and Dominic Grine, if you can come up here real fast. I just want to point out these two, Dominic here and Joe. Dominic oversees the He's a parks operations supervisor on the east side of Wheat Ridge, and Joe is the parks operations supervisor on the west side of Wheat Ridge, and they also do it a lot to train and mentor all of our park maintenance employees to keep our parks looking amazing. So thank you guys. Michelle Richardson, come on up. Michelle is our recreation supervisor that oversees the Active Adult Center, our senior programs, our senior trips, services, various things like that. So if you haven't been to the Active Adult Center, please stop by. It's a wonderful facility, and Michelle and her team do such a great job. And also just want to highlight that during the pandemic, that was a really, really tough job. So thank you to you and your team. Molly Fenley, our horticulture technician. If you like the plantings here at City Hall or at the Active Adult Center or various other places, I'll just highlight those because I've actually seen her out here doing the work and changing and making things look more beautiful. Molly's your gal. Diamante Horniak and Jacob Reitenberg. These are our aquatics coordinators. So you all, I think, are probably pretty familiar with the fact that we have a lifeguard shortage, and these two have been working tirelessly to hire and train new employees so that we can get both pools open and operating. So thank you for your hard work. Kristen YY Dennis. Kristen is our garden coordinator. And you've heard a lot in our city council meetings, especially from Councilmember Hulteen, about how activated the Happiness Garden space is. And we'll be talking about the food forest dedication tonight. YY is the reason why it's so activated. I mean, we've had Happiness Gardens, it's grown, it's flourished, and YY is why. So thank you. Susan Bennett. Susan is our environmental interpreter, and I could say a lot of different things about Susan, but I will highlight the fact that the reason why we were a Leave No Trace Spotlight event site was because of Susan's efforts. It was a team effort, but she was the leader of that, so thank you for that. And last but not least, we have Susan Anderson and Benny Pies. I always say your name wrong, and I will get it right. This is our recreation manager and our parks, forestry, and open space manager. These two really lead our department. And you know, we often get kudos at city council meetings like, Karen, your department's doing great, but it's because of all these people. And so I just want to thank you all for that. I also want to thank our Parks and Recreation Commission members. None of them are here this evening, but I'll still say that Cambria Rollo, she's our chair. Andy Rasmussen is vice chair. Karen Stanley, Kathy Koniz, Pat Cervera, Ralph Haben, Christine Semaniak, and Mark Duty is our most recent appointee, and he came last week for the first time. And then I'll just recognize, because he is here, our former chair, Guy Namiach. He was a chair of the Parks and Rec Commission for a long time, so I will give him a shout out as well. But thank you all so much for your consistent support of our department, and thank you all for everything you do every day to make it a success.
All right. We'll go to our next agenda item here, public's right to speak. The public may speak on any matter not on the agenda for a maximum of 3 minutes under public's right to speak. You may speak when called for. It looks like we have a couple people here on the list. Right. Absolutely. Thank you. And then we will also take public comment on our special study session agenda items that we have coming up after this meeting, and we have a couple people on the agenda for that. So first up tonight, under public's right to speak, we have Lori Rosendahl. The ad issues, probably, yeah.
Okay. Hello, council members. Thank you so much for entertaining me. I apologize that last week we were not available to say thank you in person. I'm Lori. I am the CEO of Foothills Regional Housing. Our office is located right here in Wheat Ridge. And last week, you generously offered to help us fill a gap in purchasing a beautiful, brand-new, unoccupied property just next to Safeway off of Wadsworth. And unfortunately, we had technical problems and couldn't get on the phone to tell you thank you. So I'm here now. I wanted to make sure and tell you thank you and tell you how much I brag about Wheat Ridge, because you are the first city who has given cash to us making buying a development of this sort or any sort. So you guys are groundbreaking in a lot of things you do, and you'll be considering some of those other things tonight. But I wanted to make sure and say thank you, and I wanted to offer you a tour. If you're interested in coming and seeing the new property, let us know. We haven't closed yet, but we don't foresee any issues in closing. We just got to bide our time and get all the pieces put together. But again, we're very grateful and wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, that is the only speaker I have signed up for Public's Right to Speak. Do we have anybody else that wants to come up and speak? Do we have anybody online? Okay. Then we will go to our Public's Right to Speak for our special study session. And first up, I have Amy Case.
Hi, Council. Thank you for having us. My name is Amy Case. I'm the Chief Real Estate Development Officer with
Can you,
Brookfield-
state your name and address for the record, please? Sorry about that.
Sure. Amy Case, our office address in Wheat Ridge is 11941 West 48th Avenue. And we're going to talk a lot more about the ICE Phase 2 in study session. Just wanted to let you know that we're here to represent that item, and we have a full presentation prepared for you. So we'll present that following this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. My next speaker I have up is Lori Rosendahl.
It's me again, and I told Patrick he'd be sick of seeing us by the end of the night. So thank you again for entertaining us, but I wanted to talk to you about your parking reduction issue that you will be deciding here soon. Really quick,
Hold on. So that's an agenda item for the meeting. Have you signed up for the special study session agenda items?
No.
No.
I
Okay.
thought that was a meeting, geez, we messed it all up.
That's okay. We can have you come back up when that agenda item comes
Fine.
up. Okay. Thank you. Do we have any other speakers for our special study session? Online? No? Okay. Let's go to our consent agenda. Ms. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. We have 3 agenda items tonight, and I will read each, the title and then the issue at hand, and then we will vote on all 3 motions. Am I understanding that
Go ahead and
correctly?
read the title and then the issues.
And the
we'll ask
issue.
and then we'll ask for a motion.
For each one?
For all 3.
Okay, all right, all right. All right, the first one is consent agenda item 1A. It's a motion to award a contract for the Recreation Center parking lot repair project to Sunland Asphalt and Construction LLC of Littleton, Colorado, and approve subsequent payments in the amount of $485,972 with a contingency amount of $48,500 for a total not to exceed the amount of $534,400.72. At issue, the Wheat Ridge Recreation Center opened in February 2020. Significant repairs to the parking lot are currently required. Due to the poor soils underlying the parking lot, staff completed an analysis and determined that a major rehabilitation consisting of a mill and overlay treatment would be more cost-effective than complete reconstruction of the parking lot. One bid was received for this work in response to an invitation to bid. The bid was in line with the engineer's estimate for the work, therefore staff recommends awarding the contract to the lowest responsive bidder, Sunland Asphalt and Construction LLC of Littleton, Colorado, in the amount of $485,972 $48,000.72 plus a staffed managed contingency of $48,500 for a total not to exceed an amount of $534,472.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, just clear.
I thank you for that.
Sorry about that. That was my mistake.
All right, we're moving on to consent agenda item 1B. This is resolution number 33-2023, a resolution approving an agreement with Denver Urban Gardens Incorporated associated with the Happiness Gardens Food Forest. The issue is that city staff work with Denver Urban Gardens, or DUG, to create a food forest at Happiness Gardens, which was dedicated on May 5th, 2023. The agreement details the ongoing relationship between the city and Denver Urban Gardens related to the food forest and the responsibilities of each entity. The third item on the consent agenda, 1C, is a motion to award a contract in the amount of $384,662.99 to Game Time Incorporated for the purchase and installation of playground equipment at Anderson Park to be funded by the reimbursement from the Metropolitan Football Stadium District. At issue, the city of Wheat Ridge received $523,551 from the sale of the Denver Broncos Football Club. The funds must be used for youth activity programs within the Wheat Ridge community. Staff presented a variety of options to youth community members and requested feedback regarding their preference. This request is for approval of a contract with Game Time in the amount of $384,662.99 for a playground to be installed at Anderson Park.
Thank you, Ms. Weaver. Can I have a motion on the consent agenda items 1A, 1B, and 1C?
I move to accept consent agenda items 1A, 1B, and 1C.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Weaver and a second by Ms. Hoppy. Will the clerk please pull the council?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the motion has passed 7-0.
Excellent. All right, let's go to agenda item number 2. Mr. Ohm, will you introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Resolution number 37-2023, a resolution approving the assignment to the Jefferson County Housing Authority, DBA Foothills Regional Housing of $1,970,630 of the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado's 2023 private activity bond volume cap allocation from the state ceiling for private activity bonds, and authorizing the execution and delivery of an assignment and other documents in connection therewith. At issue, the City of Wheat Ridge has received an allocation of $1,970,630 for the purpose of issuing private activity bonds in 2023 under the state ceiling imposed by the Tax Reform Act of 1987. Staff recommends assigning the city's allocation to Foothills Regional Housing, which has agreed to issue PABs for the IVES Affordable Housing Project at the corner of 44th and Wadsworth Boulevard.
Thank you, Mr. Ohm. This is a resolution of the council. It is not it is a public hearing. It is not quasi-judicial. We will open the public hearing. And Mr. Goff, is there a staff presentation?
Yeah, quick, brief presentation, and then Amy Case again with Foothills Regional Housing is going to come up and say a few words. But just to introduce the item, as Mr. Ohm said, the city did receive just over 1.9 million in private activity bond capacity. It's not a cash value. We're not providing a cash contribution to the Foothills Regional Housing, but it's capacity in private activity bonds. Unlike traditional municipal bonds, which are issued to fund public projects, private activity bonds are issued to finance projects that serve a public purpose. And the interest earned on private activity bonds is generally tax exempt, providing a financial advantage for borrowers and attracting investors seeking tax-free income. So traditionally, the city's been providing our annual allocation to either the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority or back to the statewide balance that can be used by other entities. Fortunately, Foothills Regional Housing has approached us the last several years to use these dollars locally, and over the past few years, we've allocated our annual allocation to Foothills for the Caesar Square apartment project in Wheat Ridge and also the Allison Village Affordable Housing Project in Arvada. They are requesting our 2023 allocation for a different project. And Amy, do you want to come up and introduce that?
Sure. Again, for the record, Amy Case, Foothills Regional Housing, Chief Real Estate and Development Officer. The Ives Phase 2 is located on the corner of 44th and Wadsworth. Phase 1 is currently under construction, and the second phase of this sort of assemblage or kind of campus development will be approximately 97 units of affordable workforce housing. This is being developed with a slightly different financing structure than Phase 1 was developed with. Phase 1 had 9% low-income housing tax credits, which do not require a debt match with private activity bonds. The financing structure for the Ives Phase 2 is a 4% transaction that does require that match of private activity bond debt. So it's really absolutely critical that we have this borrowing capacity, this tax-exempt borrowing capacity, or we really couldn't move the projects forward. Additionally, this really gives us a competitive advantage when we bring bond cap from our own local jurisdiction. It's still a competitive application because we're also asking for state of Colorado affordable housing tax credits. And several projects will all be competing for the balance of state or CHAFA private activity bond cap that Mr. Goff had talked about that you had previously assigned your cap to. When we can come in and we bring a project that we have all of our own bond cap assembled, we're much more competitive in that round for the 4% and affordable and Colorado tax credits. So it's very, very meaningful. And we're really proud of the partnership that has already developed around the Ives Phase 2 with Jefferson County and the City of Golden, both already allocating their bond cap to support this project as well. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Goff, any other presentation?
That's it from staff.
Okay. Then I will go to questions from the public. I had Amy signed up. I assume she doesn't have any questions. Do we have any other questions from the public in chambers? Public. Oh, comments, sorry. And nobody online?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Then let's go to questions from council. Do we have any questions? Not yet. Oh, well, we'll close the public comment, but questions from council? No questions? Then I will close the public hearing, and I will ask for a motion from Mr. Ohm.
Thank you, Member Tim. I move to approve resolution number 37-2023, a resolution approving the assignment to the Jefferson County Housing Authority, DBA Foothills Regional Housing of $1,970,630 of the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado's 2023 private activity bond volume cap allocation from the state ceiling for private activity bonds, and authorizing the execution and delivery of an assignment and other documents in connection therewith.
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Hoppy. Do we have any comments from council? Ms. Holteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I just want to express my excitement that we're able to do this. It's an interesting confluence of the Wadsworth project putting us in land ownership position to help partner and move this stuff forward. So I'm just really excited. A lot of this stuff's happening in District 2, and while we are suffering greatly under construction, we are also creating a lot of opportunities for people in our community to call Wheat Ridge home. So I'm just grateful for the partnership and the hard work by my colleagues on the dais and city staff to make this happen. Thank you, Foothills.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I just am very excited that for the last several years, we've been able to allocate our PABs to projects that are happening in our directly in our community of Wheat Ridge. For many years, we would allocate ours, and those supported very important other projects in other communities, but we've been lucky enough to be able to see the realization in our community, and I'm very excited to support this.
Thank you. Councilor Dozman.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites. I also wanted to express my gratitude for the partnership with Foothills Regional Housing. We were able to see firsthand what the private activity bonds could afford or go towards in our community with the Caesar Square project. And I'm really excited to continue to partner with you and see what else we can offer our community. So appreciate you. Thank you.
Any other comments? I mean, I'll just say I agree with my colleagues. I think this is a great project. I think this is exactly where we want to be for starting our affordable housing journey in Wheat Ridge, and I think this is a good start to it. So, seeing no more comments, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the motion has passed unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We'll go on to item number 3. Councilor Dozman, will you please introduce this?
Yes, thank you. Council Bill number 14, 2023, an ordinance amending Article 11 of Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning requirements for mixed-use zone districts. At issue, the proposed ordinance makes necessary updates to Article 11 of Chapter 26 of the Code of Laws, specifically to update and clarify development requirements for mixed-use zone districts. The ordinance seeks to modernize portions of the mixed-use code to provide better clarity and organization for easier administration and to establish standards that were not included in the original regulations.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on second reading. It's not quasi-judicial. We will open the public hearing. Mr. Goff, is there a staff presentation?
There is. Before we get to that, I would like to introduce Jana Easley, our new planning manager. I don't think anybody has had a chance to meet her, but Jana has extensive municipal government experience, most recently with the city of Lafayette. But she is here this evening, but Mr. Scott Cutler is going to present on this item.
Thank you, Council. Yes, so this is the first of 3 code amendments I'll be presenting tonight. The suite of code amendments we brought to you back in May at a study session, or April as well. Since then, Planning Commission also has reviewed this ordinance at a public hearing on May 18th and recommended approval. Minutes are attached. And then Council approved this ordinance on first reading as well. So just wanted to give a quick background to those that have not heard this presentation before. Council did reach consensus on this ordinance back in May, but I am going to briefly summarize the purpose of this ordinance for everyone else. So the purpose of this ordinance is to update mixed-use zoning requirements from Article 11 of Chapter 26 of the Municipal Code. These were originally adopted in 2010, and 13 years is a pretty long time to go on a code section without looking back to see how it's functioning. It is typical for cities to periodically update municipal codes as it relates to best practices, to add definitions, and to make clarifications, and this ordinance does all of that. I will briefly touch on some of the highlights of this ordinance. It is pretty long, but it does add to the code accessory building requirements. Currently, there are no allowances for accessory buildings within the mixed-use zone districts, which was an oversight from 2010. And so this ordinance adds height, setback, and material regulations for all accessory or outbuildings in the mixed-use zone districts, including sheds, garages, and ADUs. We add some cross-references as well to the code, to the city charter regarding height, density, and exempted areas. We update building placement and orientation standards, clarifying the city authority around townhomes and drive-throughs. We're making minor updates to screening requirements to be consistent with other city codes. We're updating building material requirements, including talking more about siding and brick buildings. We're enhancing fuel canopy at gas station material requirements. We're requiring specifications for synthetic materials, and we're updating transparency requirements as well to be more clear. We're clarifying height bonuses for structured parking. We're updating, the ordinance updates bicycle parking requirements by increasing the number of spaces required and also allows now indoor secured bicycle parking. We're updating open space requirements as well, including allowing community gardens to count towards usable open space, codifying existing policy around artificial turf in limited circumstances, and clarifying how open space percentages are calculated. I think, okay, almost lastly, it updates permitted uses and adds definitions, including allowing food truck parks, updating definitions of personal services, and define and allowing maker spaces across all mixed-use zone districts. And it prohibits drive-throughs in TOD, transit-oriented development areas as well. And lastly, it clarifies and refines drive-through and gas station separation requirements. We are recommending approval of the ordinance, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
I will open it up to the public first, so if we have anybody in chambers for public comments, questions, comments? Seeing nobody, do we have anybody online? Nope, okay. Going to our counselors, do we have any questions, counselors? Seeing none, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And Ms. Dozeman, can you give us a motion?
I move to approve Council Bill number 14, 2023, an ordinance amending Article 11 of Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning requirements for mixed-use zone districts on second reading, and that it takes effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Ohm. And will the clerk please, oh, I'm sorry, do we have any discussion? Sorry, my fault. Nope, Ms. Hulteen.
I guess this maybe is a little bit more of a question. So I'm of course excited about the increased requirements for bike parking, as well as the consideration for allowance of indoor secured parking. I had requested bringing forward evaluating also charging infrastructure for bikes, and I'm curious from planning if it's better to get that in here, or do we want to still handle that separately?
I think we intend to bring that back as a more comprehensive ordinance. It's going to take a little bit more research. I think we're also looking into EV parking as well for vehicles. So I know that's on the future study session agenda. I'm not sure if we have a calendar yet for it.
Ms.
It's
Hulteen,
scheduled
we,
now.
we have that later this summer, right?
I think July
Yeah.
17th,
July,
I believe.
Yeah, I think it might be tentative, but
Yeah.
it's coming.
Yeah, I know it's coming, and I would just encourage us until we get there, if an opportunity comes up in planning that anyone's looking at that, to encourage them to figure out how to include charging infrastructure for indoor bike parking, because it's increasingly needed for multifamily.
Great.
Any other comments? All right. Will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the motion has passed unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Moving on to item number 4, Councilor Hulteen, will you please introduce us?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'd like to introduce Council Bill number 15, 2023, an ordinance amending Articles 5 and 11 of Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning parking requirements for deed-restricted affordable housing and making conforming amendments therewith. At issue, the proposed ordinance reduces minimum parking requirements for deed-restricted affordable dwelling units in multi-unit residential zones and in mixed-use zones, including transit-oriented development areas.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on second reading. It is not quasi-judicial. We will open the public hearing. Mr. Goff, is there a staff presentation?
There is. Mr. Cutler is back.
I am. Thanks, Council. Yes, so this ordinance reduces minimum parking requirements for deed-restricted affordable housing dwelling units. It was discussed at City Council at a study session on April 17th, and Council gave staff the consensus to proceed with a code amendment. Since then, the ordinance did go to Planning Commission at a public hearing on May 18th. Planning Commission did not reach consensus, and they actually recommended denial by a vote of 4-3. Some of the commissioners expressed concern about the proposed minimum requirements, and there just was not agreement. That was all included in your minutes, if you're curious about that. So we did slightly revise the ordinance since Planning Commission to take some of their comments into consideration, and I can describe that in just a minute. We did also receive 2 comments online in support of this ordinance. So the adopted affordable housing strategy describes a housing supportive code amendments, and one of those items was to reduce minimum parking requirements for deed-restricted affordable housing as a potential action item. This would help address the cost of developing affordable housing in Wheat Ridge, just because parking is very expensive and takes away from land that could potentially go towards additional dwelling units or additional affordable dwelling units. The proposed ordinance still proposes to reduce minimum parking requirements for deed-restricted affordable dwelling units. And they don't affect parking requirements for market rate housing. This is specifically for deed-restricted affordable housing, as discussed at the study session. And the ordinance takes a three-tiered approach to reducing parking requirements. So we've got the largest reduction for deed-restricted affordable housing in transit-oriented development areas. Then we've got regular mixed-use zone districts, and then multi-unit projects within the R3 zone district, where we know some of our existing affordable housing projects are. The proposed requirements do reduce by about half the required number of parking spaces. These are both based on research and study sessions and conversations with Foothills and other housing providers. Planning Commission did take some issue with the minimum parking requirements that we proposed. And at the time, we had also proposed reducing the maximum to actually prevent an excess of parking spaces from being built. Those have since been removed from the ordinance, so now we're only looking at reducing the minimum parking but retaining the maximum. That will actually allow for a wider range of flexibility. So, for example, a regular mixed-use project could build between 0.5 spaces to 2.5 spaces of parking per unit. Currently, the requirement is 1 space per unit, so there's still the opportunity for reduction, but there's a wider range. Affordable housing providers, including Foothills Regional Housing, are the experts on this, and they best understand the parking needs for residents and staff, and therefore this ordinance is designed to be as flexible as possible. I am available to answer questions, as I'm sure you'll have some, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cutler. Before I go to questions from council, I do have a couple people signed up for public comments. First up, I have Lori Rosendahl. If you can state your name and address for the record.
Lori Rosendahl, 11941 West 48th, and I am here representing Foothills Regional Housing. I'm the CEO, and I just want to say a couple of things. I didn't plan anything major for this, but I did want to mention a couple of important things, I think, that will help you make this hard decision. One is marketability. Our properties still have to be marketable, so giving us the flexibility of 0.5 all the way up to 2.5 or 2 or whatever the range was, I'm sorry I missed it, but that provides us with the ability to answer our investors. And some of our investors, including Chaffa, could require that we have 1 parking spot per unit. They may be okay with 0.5. It's going to depend on the study that we do. We always do a parking study, and we also have to do a study to make sure that our properties are marketable should, once the 15 years expires, we still need to be able to, of affordability, we still need to be able to market those units. So we're going to be very careful about that, and I hope you will trust that we are very careful when it comes to parking studies and how much parking we have at all of our properties. The other thing I would add is take a look at any of the properties that we've built since I've been here. I've been here since 2016, and we've built properties in Evergreen, Westminster, Wheat Ridge, actually we've redeveloped in Wheat Ridge, Golden, and Arvada, and every one of those parking lots is usually half empty at any time. We've counted the cars for Golden, and even our Golden project, not even 75% of those spots are ever full at the most busy time. So it's really important that you just give us the flexibility to make the decision.
Thank you, Ms. Rosendahl. Next up, I have Kim Calamino.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Kim Calamino, 4070 Dover Street, Wheat Ridge. I am in support of your ordinance that you're considering on reducing parking requirements. I'm going to read my remarks because I'm a little bit rusty. You haven't seen me for a while. I applaud council, first of all, for having adopted the affordable housing strategy and for working proactively towards the steps you need to take to bring it to fruition. Including this ordinance is very reasonable adjustment to your parking ordinance that's before you tonight. As the affordable housing strategy notes, reducing minimum parking requirements for deed-restricted affordable dwelling units in the identified zone, including TOD areas, will positively address each of the 4 areas of opportunity that the affordable housing strategy identifies. Let's keep our eyes on those opportunities and take the steps we need to take advantage of them. Let's strive for more multi-unit rental housing that is inclusionary and mixed income. Let's strive for more attached ownership units that are inclusionary and mixed income. Let's preserve and upgrade existing affordable rental units. And let's maximize the potential for the redevelopment of Lutheran to achieve inclusionary mixed income outcomes. These are great outcomes to strive for. It will improve our community, and it's the right and fair thing to do. The proposed ordinance is just one of many action items to support the city's affordable housing goals. It may not be the biggest one, but we need to tick off each one in order to get where you need to be, where we need to be, where we want to be, where we've said we want to be. So let's get on with it. I think one of the things that has been already said is that the cost that unnecessary parking requirements can impose, and let's create the flexibility that the developer needs to make the project pencil, and let's rely on their expertise and the expertise of their lenders to guide us in this process, because we're not the experts, they are. So I think the staff did a great job with their memo, and I thank them also for their thoroughness, and I support passage and hope you will. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Calomino. Do we have anybody else that would like to speak tonight? Do we have anybody signed up online?
No, sir.
All right, I will go to questions from council.
Oh, we do? Sorry.
Oh.
Apparently I overlooked something.
Oh, we have a hand, okay. We will go to the clerk to...
For some reason, I cannot get Zoom to expand. There we go. Maybe that'll work. There we go. I apologize. We do have two.
Okay.
Kelly Blinn, B-L-Y-N-N, is first on the list.
All right, Ms. Blinn, if you will state your name and your address for the record, and then you may speak. Is she unmuted? Ms. Blinn? She's still there?
She is.
Now I'm unmuted.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, and thanks for your time. My name's Kelly Blinn, and I'm a resident of Wheat Ridge in District 2, as well as an urban planner. And I wanted to express my support for the proposal for reduced minimum parking requirements for affordable housing. This is a modest proposal informed by data that is critical for addressing both sustainability and housing affordability here in Wheat Ridge. And I sincerely hope Council will not only approve this modest proposal, but can also consider going further to reduce and eliminate parking requirements for all housing types. Parking requirements are frequently poorly tuned to market realities and often cause developers to build more parking than gets used, which results in reducing the amount of housing that can be built due to space and cost reasons, and these costs often get passed on to owners or renters. Just the estimates of the increase in units that Foothills Regional Housing could have delivered with these codes updates, I think, speaks for themselves, that a simple change could have netted the city 18 additional units on one site with no additional cost. So let's not miss our opportunity on other sites to build more affordable housing at less cost. From a sustainability perspective, too, when parking does get overbuilt, studies have shown it incentivizes more driving. There was a study recently for lottery-based affordable housing in San Francisco that looked at residents who were placed into different affordable housing sites by lottery, and they found that buildings with at least one parking space per unit have more than twice the car ownership rate of buildings that have no parking. On a larger scale, building more parking into our city makes our built environment less pedestrian-friendly and livable. No one loves having to traverse a hot parking lot on a summer day. They'd rather be on a shady sidewalk. Reducing, or better yet, eliminating parking requirements does not mean no parking will be built. It simply puts the judgment on housing developers to assess their customers' needs and build it accordingly. While addressing affordable housing should be the top priority that we're addressing tonight, the vast majority of residents in Wheat Ridge do not live in deed-restricted affordable housing, but nevertheless are struggling to afford housing. The new housing strategy and action plan establishes principles like housing type diversity and a full housing ladder for all incomes. and the same issues with parking apply for housing of all types. So I hope council will support this proposal tonight and also revisit our other parking minimums soon. This is not a radical proposal. Wheat Ridge would be in good company with cities from across the spectrum like Minneapolis, San Jose, Gainesville, Florida, Lexington, Kentucky, who have all eliminated parking requirements that no longer serve their needs. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you, Ms. Blinn. I see, do we have another hand raised?
No, sir.
No? Looks like we have two, or no, just two attendees.
Didn't.
Hello?
Sorry, that was Kelly Bland. Ms. Stevenson.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry.
Go ahead and introduce yourself and state your name and your record or your name and address for the record, and then you can go ahead and speak.
Sure. My name is Montana Stevenson, and I am a Wheat Ridge resident at 3655 Harlan Street. And I'm here tonight because I am concerned about housing affordability in Wheat Ridge. And I think that, nationally, we're really in the midst of a housing crisis. We have 500,000 people experiencing homelessness in America in the last year. And then there's also millions of people spending really significant portions of their income on housing costs. The numbers in the Wheat Ridge Affordable Housing Strategy and Action Plan indicate that our city is also part of this worrying national trend. For example, the strategy noted that as of 2020, more than half of all Wheat Ridge renter households paid 30% or more of their household income towards housing costs. And to me, this really isn't acceptable, and I think we can do better. And I think that doing better means we need to take proactive steps as a community to create affordable housing options in our city. Personally, I would really like to live in a community that has economic diversity, where families can afford to live, where people on fixed incomes can afford to live, and where people who provide important services in our community, like childcare providers, home health aides, nurses, teachers, can afford to live close to where they work. I think the proposal on the table tonight, like a lot of policy proposals, presents a clear trade-off. And here it's more housing for people or more parking for cars. And I would really like to see the city council vote in favor of more housing for people. I think at this time, we really need to remove barriers to the creation of more affordable housing for people, and that really should be our priority. And so one clear way to do that would be to reduce these parking minimums and allow, the developers who really are the experts to decide what's right for various projects that they undertake. And then finally, aside from, building more housing for people, I think that reducing parking minimums can help increase density by prioritizing space for homes instead of cars. And that in turn can help us make a better case in the future for improving public transit, for improving pedestrian and biking routes within our city. And so I'd really like council to support this update to the ordinance this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else online that would like to speak?
No,
sir. Okay. Seeing nobody else from the public that would like to speak, I will open up to questions from council. No questions from council. Okay. I will close the public hearing and ask Ms. Hulteen for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I move to approve Council Bill number 15, 2023, an ordinance amending Articles 5 and 11 of Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning parking requirements for deed-restricted affordable housing and making conforming amendments therewith on second reading, and that it takes effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Hoppy. Do we have comments? Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Not only do we have an affordable housing strategy, but we've been asked by our community to address affordable housing, and we've heard that through several of our citizen surveys, through direct comment to us as council members, and through through What's Up Wheat Ridge. And so this is a small but meaningful way to support the growth of attainable housing in our community, and I think that it's important that we take the small steps to be able to have these areas created in our house, in our community, and I agree that we should be making more room for housing. This will allow a multitude of more units, and that's what we need to be able to have attainable housing and to be able to have a diverse community. And so I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Ms. Hoppy. Councilor Weaver.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you, Ms. Hoppy, for your comments. I just also will be supporting this, and I just really appreciate the callers that called in tonight and the people that have spoke, because I think it just, it's important to have data-backed decision-making, and I just really appreciate all of the experts that are in the room tonight. So thank you for coming in and speaking, and thank you for speaking online, if that's where you came and spoke from.
Thank you. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Just ditto to what's been previously said, but I will just reiterate, I mean, we did adopt an affordable housing strategy, and it's an action plan, and we're taking, I mean, I don't know, if there's some sort of national record for adopting a plan and implementing to the scale, especially for a city of our size, like, I'm just really proud of that, and this is a really meaningful way, and it's based on data. Like, we're hearing from Foothills, this is actual parking utilization rates, and one of the things I know through my work is that in Colorado, 15% of households with 2 or more people only have 1 car, and a household is 2.52 people in Colorado. So when you look at the household level, and 5% of households have no cars. So when you look at it at the household level, what we really know is that people who are experiencing cost burden through housing, like, are actually not, a lot of them don't have a second car. And everyone in the house has a destination. And because we're looking at making this work well on our transit lines, and we're looking at putting housing on our corridors where they have access to transit, it's really a holistic solution. So we know both from Foothills data and from our census data that a lot of our households are not two-car households. And you know, if they do have 2 cars, we do have streets. I know it's a little controversial, but streets are public right-of-ways, and if people end up having to park in the street occasionally, that's part of, you know, the commons and civic life. In my neighborhood, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name of it. What is the name of the development on Yarrow Street? The
Yarrow Gardens?
Anyway, the townhouse development. Patrick, what's the name of it? Yeah.
Judy?
No, not
Oh,
Judy, like
the
in my
one on-
neighborhood, over by Happiness Gardens.
Oh.
Why am I forgetting the name of
Thrive
it?
Gardens.
Westridge.
The Thrive,
No.
Yarrow Gardens.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, anyway,
Yeah.
the townhouse development that everybody was like really freaked out was going to have all of this like parking spilling out into the community. I walk by there twice a day, and there's almost rarely ever a single car like parked on the street. So I think this is a great way to encourage developers to, you know, use the flexibility they need for a product that is going to meet our community's needs, and we've identified the affordable housing. So I'm very much in support, and looking forward to seeing it utilized.
Thank you, Councilor Hulteen. Let's go to Councilor Dozman.
Thank you. I agree. I think that this is allowing us to remove barriers to affordable housing, and is definitely a step in the right direction after adopting the strategy and action plan that we have on council. And I really appreciate my colleagues in kind of asking and answering some questions in regards to this. You know, when we studied this at study session, I asked about the surveys and if there were like senior housing taken into consideration, and therefore kind of adjusting the numbers, and a lot of my questions were answered. And I do fear, when I initially read this, one of my biggest concerns is that it would have an unintended consequence, because a lot of us tend to hear about parking issues and spilling out onto the streets, and I would hate for this to kind of disincentivize affordable housing or support for it in the community. However, I think that might be an inflated perception, and I think as far as the development that we've seen thus far, it is on major corridors where public transit is a viable option. So I just appreciate everyone's work on this, including staff, and I'm also going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just say, too, I agree with my colleagues. I think that this is just one of those small things that we can do to really make big impacts. So, there's a saying that small hinges swing big doors, and I think this is one of those small hinges that we're putting on a big door problem. So, seeing no other comments, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the motion has passed unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Going to item number 5. Councilor Hoppy, will you please introduce this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Council Bill number 16-2023, an ordinance amending Articles 1 and 2 of Chapter 26 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning definitions and regulations for child care facilities and making conforming amendments therewith. At issue, the proposed ordinance allows daycare centers in neighborhood commercial NC and restricted commercial RC zone districts, updates the code to align with state regulations, provides cross-reference in the zone district use chart for home-based daycare, which are allowed as a home occupation, and permits daycare centers at institutional properties in residential and agricultural zone districts. The ordinance is intending to reduce barriers to opening new child care facilities in Wheat Ridge.
Thank you, Councilor Hoppy. This is an ordinance on second reading. It is not quasi-judicial. I will open the public hearing. And Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation?
We do. One more time, Mr. Cutler.
Thanks again. Yes, so this ordinance was discussed with City Council at a study session on April 17th. Council provided consensus for staff to proceed with the code amendment. This ordinance was presented at Planning Commission on May 18th, and they recommended approval of the ordinance. Since we were last at City Council, this ordinance has expanded slightly in talking with our city attorney to comply with additional state laws and intent of state law, so I'll get into that in just a second. But currently our code really is lacking in terms of allowing child care facilities across the city in a lot of ways. And this ordinance seeks to update that by expanding where daycare centers, which are the larger commercial facilities, can be located. Those facilities can now be located with the ordinance in restricted commercial and neighborhood commercial zone districts where they are currently prohibited. We discussed this a little bit in the study session, but these are primarily located on commercial corridors or collector streets and are really designed to accommodate neighborhood serving uses. So this ordinance seeks to allow daycare facilities at those locations where they're currently prohibited. It also allows daycare centers to operate and repurpose vacant non-residential properties in residential zones. That can include things like places of worship, schools, or institutional buildings with approval of a special use permit. Right now they're prohibited. And current regulations also, future regulations, if this ordinance is approved, will also allow daycare centers to operate if there's a school that's already at that location. So if there's a school or church, this ordinance will allow them to operate just as a permitted use. Currently, that would be a special use permit application. So it reduces a little bit of a process barrier there. And the ordinance also aligns with state law in terms of definitions, defining daycare centers and daycare homes and the number. And the addition to the ordinance at kind of the last minute here was in 2021, the state legislature approved House Bill 21-1222, which identified the shortage of child care facilities as a matter of statewide interest. And that bill established that home-based child care facilities must be permitted as use by right in all residential zone districts. Right now, the city currently allows small home-based daycares up to 6 children, but we require a special use permit for large home-based daycares up to 12 children in some of the zone districts, the R1 and R2 series. And this ordinance will modify the use chart and home occupation regulations to allow up to 12 children in home-based daycare pursuant to state law. We can still do things like restrict the proximity of home-based childcare for these larger facilities, and we can still require traffic and parking information, and that's reflected in the ordinance. But according to our attorney, we do need to allow the larger home-based daycares as well. I don't have any other things to present on. We are recommending approval. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cutler. I will open it up to public comment. I have nobody signed up to speak. Do we have anybody in chambers that'd like to come in up to speak? No? Do we have anybody online?
Montana Stevenson has a hand up.
Okay.
Perhaps.
We will go
Like comment
to
again?
Montana Stevenson. You can unmute your mic and then introduce yourself and give us your address for the record, and then go ahead and start.
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't mean to keep it up. Thanks.
All right. Anybody else from the public? All right, seeing nobody else from the public, I will open it up to the counselors. Ms. Weaver?
Mr. Cutler, I just have a question, and there's nothing behind this. I'm just kind of curious on the definition of daycare. Where does adult daycare fall in this requirement, if at all? And do we regulate, I'm thinking of like an Alzheimer's daycare type situation.
We do discuss adult daycare in some of our zone districts. It's
Adult.
actually specifically called out in the mixed-use zone district. This ordinance does not specifically make reference to that, although I'm not sure if there's a state definition, or Jerry could chime in. Not totally sure.
I'm not aware of a state, there may well be, but it's not a question I've ever had to answer for daycare as opposed to residential. If it was, day and night residential care, so not just bringing the person there during the day.
No, I'm talking about daycare.
Okay,
Truly daycare.
Yeah.
I was just curious if,
Right.
do we have restriction on adult
Yeah.
daycare as opposed to child daycare?
No, I mean, we treat child daycare specifically.
Okay.
So adult daycare would be, if not a use listed, a specific use listed, then it wouldn't be permitted. It certainly doesn't carry with it the protections of the statute that Mr. Cutler was mentioning. There's nothing wrong with, and the city would have all authority to decide to engage in that arena and say, here's where adult daycare is allowed and here's where it isn't.
Okay.
I haven't had the chance to look at the code to see if there's another definition that could be extended to apply to that. I just don't know right offhand.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was just-
unfortunately, I don't have the code in front of me either. I know it's referenced in some sections of our code. I know, for example, the mixed-use section, it's daycare, comma, child and adult, and it's a permitted use in mixed-use zones, but as far as the rest of the city, I'm not sure. There may be a line item in the use chart, but that was not the focus of this ordinance.
I realize we're trying to address the issue of child daycare with this ordinance. I'm just wondering if, since daycare is also the same concept, if we should be considering adult as well in this, even though that's like, are they more similar or are they more different? Or are we going to be revisiting this at some point when adult daycare is a need that we might have to expand? I'm just asking the question.
I think I'd suggest that, the public policy issues around adult daycare, I think, are probably significantly different than childcare, where you're dealing with typically younger parents who need to work, and just that whole set of needs around childcare. I'm not saying at all that there aren't equally compelling needs for the caregivers for adults, but I suspect that the policy considerations are different enough that they should be, addressed, separately if council has interest in that.
And we do allow things, I mean, there are a lot of permitted uses that fall kind of under the institutional category, including outpatient medical, things like that. So I think to some extent our bases are already covered on that.
Okay.
But I don't have the code in front of me to know where it's not allowed.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Hoppy?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, and this code specifically calls out up to 16 years old, and so it's 16 and under is covered in this code.
Okay. Any other questions from council? No? I will close the public hearing and ask Ms. Hoppy for a motion.
I move to approve Council Bill number 16-2023, an ordinance amending Articles 1 and 2 of Chapter 26 of the Wheaton Ridge Code of Laws concerning definitions and regulations for child care facilities and making conforming amendments therewith on second reading, and that it takes effect 15 days after final publication.
Second.
We have a second by Councilor Hutchinson. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the motion is passed unanimously, sir.
Excellent. Moving on, it looks like we are down to city managers' matters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Just a couple quick things. The second iteration of our survey is out, which is measuring residents' level of support for potential ballot question to extend our half-cent sales tax. I think it was out maybe today. Individuals will be randomly selected and to receive that, and I think it'll go for the next couple weeks, and then we have study session scheduled to come back to you with those results. So, and then some exciting news. We're starting to see our public art policy and ordinance come to fruition a bit. The public art piece out at the Clear Creek Crossing Project is going up today. It's the Agrarian Calling is the name. I think Ms. Adala sent out an email with some photos, but if you get a chance, you might be able to see it going up in the next couple days. So, thanks.
Awesome. City managers' matters. Oh, I'm sorry, city attorney's matters.
Doesn't matter, nothing tonight.
All right, thank you, sir. Elected officials' matters. We'll start with the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I have nothing new this evening.
All right. Moving on, we'll start with Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. A couple things. Wednesday is Bike to Work Day, one of the best days of the year. Super excited about that. I believe there is a party in the afternoon at iPie for folks who want to ride their bikes on over there for some fine pizza in District 2. And then also starting on July 1st, it is 2 months of fare-free transit throughout the RTD region. Last year, it was just for the month of August, and the legislature extended it to be 2 months. So from July 1st through August 31st, you can jump on a train or a bus and go for free wherever your heart desires. And I oftentimes take the 44 to go downtown. But recently, I actually rode my bike up to the Old Town rail station and just rolled my bike onto the train at Old Town Arvada, and the bike racks were full. There were so many bikes already on the train. And I rode the train to Union Station, and then I actually had to go out to Stapleton. So I got on the A line with my bike out to Stapleton. And then I actually rode my bike home. But so you can put your bike on the train and go places. So I encourage everyone to have some adventures and take advantage of not driving your car. The reason we get it is for air quality reasons. And air quality, I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting text alerts almost every day right now about air quality. So opt on the bus to clean the air up.
Thank you.
And ride your bike on Wednesday for Bike to Work Day.
Thank you. Let's go on. Councilor Dozman.
Thank you. I wanted to extend appreciation and kudos to Paige Piper and her team at Local Works for putting on a wonderful Ridge Fest this last Saturday. My kids and I had a wonderful time, and it was a great turnout. Weather was perfect. The cornhole tournament was a great addition. A couple friends of mine that I went to school with actually ended up taking the cake, or I guess the smoker home. So congratulations to them. And also wanted to extend a thank you to Melinda Stewart from Sweet Ridge Studios and her team as well. My younger son really enjoyed a summer art camp this last week, and really gave him something to do. So we really appreciate those opportunities in our community. Sweet Ridge Studios has a lot more camps coming up at into July and August. So check out their website and get your kiddos signed up. And along with some of the events that are happening this upcoming week, the farmers market at Wheat Ridge Poultry and Meats on Wednesday is again this Wednesday, June 28th from 5 to 7 p.m. And then we also have a Yoga on the Green on Wednesday, the 28th as well, so from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. So if you're able to check one or both of those out, they're great events and great way to meet people and get involved in the community. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. On June 15th, I was a mystery reader for reading books at the Stevens Elementary with the mayor, and it was put on by Local Works, Jeffco Library, and the Stevens School. And I was lucky that I had two little nieces that attended that also go to the school, so I was able to read some books to them. And I just want to thank staff and my fellow council members for considering issues that are important to our community as they impact our daily lives. We do a lot of stuff. On council, I have a lot of different conversations with constituents, and I really appreciate, and they do too, that, we all have really good discussions and that we're able to, keep moving forward as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. My granddaughter and myself went into Mercedes Burrito Restaurant next to Wheat Ridge Cyclery and had great burritos. And I do hope that they stay. There was a question about that, so that's a good thing. And also, I am grateful for the tour today at the Intermountain Hospital. Been very curious about what it was going to be. It's a lot of windows, but it's great that they're being innovative and thinking ahead, so it's a good thing, and they'll have a lot of parking. So, thank you.
Councilor Weaver.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This Friday at Lewis Meadows, the goats will be back eating weeds. And so if anyone would like to come meet the goats, and we will also be doing a Regenerate Wheat Ridge on using farm ruminants as weed eaters and soil regenerative. They're working for Parks and Rec for the city. How's that? Join us at Lewis Meadows Park. The goats should be there around 10 a.m.-ish. And so I'll be there to answer questions, as will some other Park and Rec folks. And I hear that Mr. Stites also may be there, because I like to put him in charge of Willie Nelson,
I love Willie Nelson.
the buck. Yeah, you guys are buddies. So thank you, and I'd love to see anyone from the city, and especially from District 3, out on Friday afternoon in Los Meadows.
Thank you, Ms. Weaver. Looking forward to it. Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah, I also was mighty impressed with the tour at Intermountain Health today. One of the things that is exciting about, we get the question of why did we have to build a new hospital from the ground up? And one of the things that's exciting about this hospital is that they are able to turn a lot of their rooms into trauma rooms in case we come into any major, lessons learned from the pandemic, basically. They also have a whole wing that they can isolate, so it's like a hospital within a hospital, which is pretty cool. If you find yourself in the unfortunate need to be in that hospital at some point, though, you want to definitely be on the west side on the 6th floor, because the view is amazing from there. So.
You can get a room next to Ms. Hoppy's in mine, because I'm going to be there too, just hang out. I'm going to get a suite. Appreciate it. Yeah, I enjoyed the hospital tour today as well. I think that Intermountain is building a beautiful, long-lasting legacy here in the community, so we appreciate what they're doing. It did remind me too, though, that one of the first questions that I get from District 3 residents specifically about the hospital isn't about the new hospital, it's about the old one, what's going to happen at the Legacy campus. So just a reminder that at the moment, not much is happening other than hospital stuff. But if you're looking for the future, whatsupwheatridge.com is probably the best place to kind of keep tabs on what's going on there. So just make sure that if you're in the community and you're looking for pretty much anything that's going on in the city of Wheat Ridge, whatsupwheatridge.com is the place to look. I want to thank Guy Namiash, I'm not sure if he's still here, for putting on Art on the Farm on Saturday. It's always a treat in my neighborhood especially, but everybody loves to get to go back and see the art, hear the music, all that stuff. So usually it's the last Saturday, I believe, of the month. So there'll be one coming up in July. I do want to thank Local Works and Paige Piper for an amazing Ridge Fest the other day. My kids had a blast. My business, Personal Achievement Martial Arts, we have a booth there every year. It's always a great turnout for us, so we really appreciate all the work that they do. And as Ms. Hutchinson said, Wheat Ridge is a sneaky place for really good breakfast burritos. Mercedes is fantastic. Aguas Calientes is fantastic. Salsas is fantastic. El Jefe is fantastic. We have just amazing restaurants here in the city of Wheat Ridge. So if you're looking for a breakfast burrito, what did I say? Real Roberto's is fantastic as well. So if I missed any, I apologize. But you know, if you're out running around and you're looking for a breakfast burrito, you can find one. You should definitely buy it in Wheat Ridge, along with anything else that you can find. Coming up, we have no meeting next Monday. It's the 4th of July on Tuesday, so we have no meeting on Monday. Just a reminder to be safe out there. Fireworks are illegal in the city of Wheat Ridge. Is that true, Mr. Goff? Correct. So fireworks are not good, so please don't light them off. It's been a wet summer, but we don't need any fires going on. So if there's no business to come before the council here, I will adjourn us to our special study session. Are we ready to start that now? Okay, so we'll take 5 minutes and then we'll come back. Okay? Thank you. Have a great 4th of July. Call to order the special study session for Monday, June 26, 2023. We have two agenda items on the agenda tonight. We have the Ives Affordable Housing Project Phase 2, and we have membership of in the Urban Renewal Authority. We will open up our study session as we always do with public comment. We had a couple commenters in the meeting before for this, so I will open it up to anybody who's in chambers or online now that would like to speak. I see nobody coming forward in chambers. Don't believe we have anybody online.
Oh, let me see.
Nope, don't see anybody. Okay. Then we will go to agenda item number 1. Mr. Goff?
Lost my, 1 second, please. Gotta pull up my notes, my computer froze. Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stites. So this evening, we are here to talk more about the Ives Affordable Housing Project that you heard a little bit about earlier from Foothills Regional Housing. So they're here to give a bigger presentation. So as you all know, I believe, the city did purchase some property for the Wadsworth, Improve Wadsworth project. One of those properties was the Bank of the West, which is on the northeast corner of 44th and Wadsworth. The city is in ownership of that structure and that property. It was needed for right-of-way for the Wadsworth project, but just a certain portion of the right-of-way was needed for the project. There's a remnant that is still available. Foothills Regional Housing talked about phase 2 of their development of the Ives project, and they are here this evening to request that the city contribute the Bank of the West property for this project. We also talked a lot this evening about our affordable housing strategy and action plan, and one of the primary recommendations is that in that plan was to support public, private, and nonprofit organizations developing affordable housing in the city and to provide material support through subsidies such as land. And this is essentially a land banking opportunity that the city has in its control to help participate in an affordable housing project. So again, I'll turn it over to Amy Case, and she has a presentation here on phase 2 and the requests for the city. Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Goff, and council, thank you for having us back again. I don't know if I need to restate my name for the record, Amy Case. And I wanted to just tell you a little bit more about phase 2 of the Ives. But before I do that, I think I want to back up a little bit and talk about the history of the Housing Authority's site control over most of the block. We used to have our office at the 7490 building, which is up against the north side of these parcels. And we had our headquarters there, and now you have some of your staff occupying that building, but that is owned by the Housing Authority. We purchased the old Pep Boys site, so we have control of that site. We purchased a retail building right on the corner of 45th and Wadsworth that has a commercial tenant in it now. But really sort of the missing piece of our control over that block and really being able to do it justice in terms of master planning is the bank building site. We have visions of serving a variety of diverse populations on the Ives campus, which could be built out in up to 4 phases. Phase 1, just to kind of reiterate, is 50 units. 25 of them are going to be housing residents that are referred from the Jefferson Center for Mental Health, and the Jefferson Center will be providing on-site case management for those folks. The remainder are workforce housing, all at or below, on average, 60% of the area median income. So our next part of the vision is Phase 2. And the question of how many units can be in Phase 2 is really dependent on whether or not we can utilize the additional space that the bank building would provide us. How do I advance? There we go. So our vision for Phase 2, and I'll probably use this word over and over tonight, is synergy. It's about a synergistic occupation with Phase 1 and future phases, and really what the master plan of that entire block can look like. Again, we would serve 1, 2, and 3-bedroom households at the Ives Phase 2. Phase 1 is all 1 and 2 bedrooms. So this really allows us to start taking larger family groups into this kind of housing. One of our goals is really to be Wadsworth forward, partially because we believe that that is what the city has told us that they would like to do. They'd like to have Wadsworth Street frontage, and that really allows us to open up the inside of the master plan community to really create a sense of community and continuity through the middle of the block. We believe that 44th and Wadsworth is a premium street corner that really deserves to be reinvigorated within the city limits of Wheat Ridge. And also the park, the Applebacher Park, which is right behind that site. We really like to take advantage of that tremendous resource and activate it. So this really kind of goes for all of our properties that we develop, but I want to assure you that we always develop very high quality units, not only for the benefit of those community members that are going to be living in those units, but we are making 50-year affordability commitments to these projects. So it's very important to us that the design and the materials and the features are durable and they are efficient to operate and lower cost to maintain. So we do believe we will be able to produce a very high quality product for you on that corner. There's a lot of synergy with the meeting spaces, the community spaces and case management spaces at the Ives 1. We believe that our service providers can use those Ives spaces to serve some of the residents who might be living at the Ives 2 who have similar needs for services. And then the 4097 Vance project that you all so generously supported is really located just a couple of blocks from the Ives campus. So we know we have some efficiencies by sort of centralizing staff in that area because it's so convenient. Not, with another property. Of course, there's synergy operating within the Ives phases itself. So this is kind of an overview of our initial concept for the corner of 44th and Wadsworth, if we are able to utilize the bank site for development. What I want to point out is the facade, the street-facing facade along Wadsworth, also along 44th. So really, the views will be very activated by the structure traversing north up Wadsworth. And the sort of brown kind of at the top, I guess I'd call that sort of a tan color. So that is community and amenity space in our initial concept plan. And what we also feel like we could do is the portion of that community space that is facing Wadsworth and the north. Our goal is to give that a sort of a commercial or sort of a commercial or a retail or a business sort of facade, even though that's not the use of it. We know that there's been interest in bringing a bit of a commercial or mixed-use feel to that corner, so we think we can do some of that just with design elements in the facade. We love the site because it is so convenient to transportation. We don't know, what the result of our parking study will be because it's not been completed on this site yet. But we appreciate some of the flexibility that you all have generously supported on second reading of your ordinance tonight. And we're excited to contribute to your affordable housing strategy. Again, we think that this could be a real catalyst to reinvigorate and reactivate Applebacher Park. Talking a little bit about our options without this parcel, current estimates, we think we can develop probably at least 18, 20 less units. And we don't think we can provide the Wadsworth frontage to the level that we think the site deserves. Much more parking would have to be along the middle, the shared streets that would cut north, south, sort of through the middle of the block between 44th and 45th. We'd have to park that pretty more intensively rather than being able to provide sort of a greener streetscape neighborhood experience through the middle of the site. The general conditions that we're experiencing as part of our costs of development, we believe will be much higher because we would have to more immediately demolish the Pep Boys site, which has been able to serve as a construction, on-site construction management office for the Ives Phase 1 right now. And it could probably continue doing that through the completion of Phase 2. If we have to demolish the Pep Boys building immediately, that's going to add some additional general conditions costs to our bid. Also, the way the site is able to, the way we've laid it out, we do have an opportunity with the additional space, just the additional surface square footage, that we think we can also provide a little bit of green space along Wadsworth too, as well, kind of looking back straight into Phase 1. And we won't have any opportunity for green space. We'll probably just have parking along Wadsworth without the additional of the bank parcel. Talking about who we served, as I mentioned, we'll have some larger family units in this project. All units will serve residents with average income at or below 60%. We believe that this is definitely a workforce housing community, and that we will be able to provide some special preferences for residents experiencing housing insecurity who are referred to the project by the Wheat Ridge staff housing navigation team. Why is it really important that we move forward on Phase 2 now? Several reasons. We've had recent success in a highly competitive 9% tax credit award round for Phase 1. And as you see, that's coming up out of the ground and going up now, and that was awarded on our first application, which is, it's a major accomplishment. Chaffa gets about 3 applications for every deal that they have tax credit allocation available to award. So, that puts us in the top third of all performers when we submit competitive applications. So we'd like to kind of play off of the success of that round. Currently, we have adequate private activity bond cap to fund this project at the level it needs to be funded at. We have some bond cap that we banked for a few years to get here. bond cap does expire after 3 years. We would never let it expire. We would make sure it got used somewhere, at least throughout the state. But right now, we have enough on our books to use right here locally on the Ives Phase 2. We feel like we have good cost data right now because of the recent closing and bidding of the Ives Phase 1 that's specific to that site. You know, our soil studies are done, things like that. Master planning is currently in place for the entire site, like you're seeing here. This is some early kind of ideas about the phasing. Well, that's pretty solid ideas about the phasing, actually. You can see one there in the blue, which is the 9%, 50 units going up now. Two would be the bank site and part of the Pep Boys site that we own. 3 would assume, and it's just an assumption that we would at some point be able to utilize land on the lower right side that is owned by a private owner right now. And then Phase 4, which is the other retail building that we have leased out to a commercial tenant for the time being. But as I said, we're currently under contract with the master planning group and working through all of this phasing right now, so we'd really like to get it right the first time. And then we're hoping that maybe the timeline would work out close enough that, and, you know, assuming procurement justified the use of some of the same vendors or contractors, that we might be able to roll on to Phase 2 without a full demobilization and remobilization of crews on the site, which would provide some cost savings to us. As I said earlier, and thank you so much for your generosity with your bond cap allocations. We've also had the City of Golden and Jefferson County donate assign their bond cap to this project as well, and I'm talking multiple years of assignment, not just one. We've had early conversations with the Jefferson County Home Funds administrative folks, and they are looking at trying to forward allocate most of their entire home fund awards for 24 and 25 to this project. So the county in cash is looking at a commitment of about $1.5 million. Colorado Division of Housing, we're anticipating a $40,000 per unit commitment from them, so almost $4 million. And then our own commitment, besides the assembly that we've already done of all the sites and all the parcels that I've talked about, we are also intending to reinvest $1.8 million of cash from former public housing projects in the county that we have invested in another asset now, but we'd like to move that investment to this project. We're willing to commit likely up to about 30 project-based housing choice vouchers, and I did an estimate that was probably pretty conservative of the value of the housing choice voucher subsidy. Our current average per unit cost is about $1,100 a month per household that we serve, which is about 1,700 households in Jefferson County. So, you know, $1,100, assuming no inflation, just $1,100 now, you know, times 30 units per month, times 12 months per year, times a 15-year contract commitment that we're willing to make. I think you can see that we're serious about putting our assets into investment in this property and in this community. We typically defer up to up to 50% of our developer fee earnings to be collected over time through cash flow only if we perform well in managing the property. And then we are always willing to carry back equity we have in land that we're using to site the project. So with that, happy to answer any questions about the project or, listen to your dialogue, and very anxious to hear what you all have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Case. I will open it up to councilors for discussion. Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you for this presentation. That particular piece of land is not exactly valuable for us as a city in ownership of it, and except in the way that we can utilize it to catalyze a bigger project like this. One of the things over the years when, the questions have been, how can we get more attainable housing in our community? One of the answers has always been, well, if you own property, then you can sell it really cheap to someone to develop it for attainable housing. And we had the Fruitdale Lofts, and that was all we had that would be usable for that. So we now have this property, which I think is a great opportunity for us to support this project. This is an absolute appropriate place for this type of project and this type of density. It's right on our major corridors, which many of our community members have said, we don't want density deep in our small nodes in our community and our small streets, but we are okay with it being on the corridors. This absolutely helps with the corridors. One question I have though is, you're saying 60% AMI, and in all of your phases in your projects, do you have any plan to go to up to an 80% AMI?
So the intention is to use a income averaging technique allowed by the IRS for these types of projects, where we can actually have some units at 70 and 80% of the area median income, offset by units that are restricted 30, 40, 50% of the income of the area median income, but the line is they have to average 59.9 or less.
Excellent. That's excellent. I'm so happy to hear that, because that truly does make it work for a workforce housing and a diversity, a balance in that community. So I am definitely in support of giving you this building.
And just a reminder, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 60% AMI is about $52,000 for one person. Does that sound about right in Jefferson County? Somewhere in that range, so about $52,000, just to give you a perspective. It's for one person. For three people, it's about $67,000.
Councilor Weaver.
Thank you for your presentation. I have two questions. One for Patrick. Why wouldn't we give them this parcel? What's the downside for us?
We've been thinking about this parcel for a long time, and could we get a retail presence there, separate from the the affordable housing project? And I think that would be the only upside. We don't believe that the size of parcel that's left after we gave right away for the Wadsworth project is big enough to really do much of anything. There's no parking. That's why we had to buy the whole parcel, not just the right of way needed for Wadsworth, because the right of way we took basically made the bank property unusable for business operations. So we don't believe it would be very tight. It would probably be a very small, if anything, maybe a tiny drive-through of some sort. I'm not sure if that would even fit in with the new continuous flow interchange that's going to go in that area too. That's going to make that hard corner even more unusable for a retail presence, because it's going to be more difficult to get into that hard corner. Okay. So we believe that this use is probably the best use at this time, just because of, again, using the word synergy of what Foothills is doing. They own all the property around it. This is just a great opportunity, as Councilmember Hoppy said. We've never had an opportunity to land bank necessarily. That we did land bank for the Wadsworth project, and we believe this is a good use for the parcel.
Well, I'm very supportive of this. I do have one more question, and I'm not sure if it's for both of you, but the other one is on the maps that were shown, my understanding is that AAA is still a separate parcel, and that's a business that's been in our community for a long time.
Which one? I'm sorry.
The AAA propane.
Oh, propane, yes.
And do you own that already, or is that, so that would only be my concern, is that I would like to not see them pressured, especially if we're going to give this other parcel. I just, the only thing I didn't agree with was it sounds like you have intentions to try and buy that, and I would not support pressuring that business, because it's a very old, well-respected Wheat Ridge business. So can either of you, one of you, talk about what it means to have propane near a housing facility like this?
Amy, you want to go? Start.
Yeah, so appreciate everything you have to say, and it's certainly not our interest as a steward of the public interest to push, a local small business owner in any way like that. Have we had conversations with them? Yes. Yes, we have. We're engaging in kind of an interactive dialogue about their future and the future of the site. So we've been doing some research, and we've got an environmental consultant trying to get to the bottom of what that might mean to have that site there. What we believe right now is that as long as they are meeting the commercial propane licensing standards, at least of 2017, and we don't know yet, we haven't had this level of dialogue with them, there's really not a setback requirement, because those standards for public safety are so high that it's considered safe to build at or near. But certainly, we've also looked at it with a 200-foot sort of safety zone around it as an option too with our planning.
Just as a reminder, I don't know if you remember, they've been great business to work with, and they were very cooperative when the town center project went in across the street to the south of 44th, and worked with that developer because there was a blast zone issue there, and the developer worked with them to size their tanks down, I think, to smaller size so that it decreased the blast zone. So they've been great partners with the city, and the city hasn't had any conversations with them, just with this project. It's all been Foothills.
My only concern is I am supportive of us giving this parcel. It would just be very important to me that they were not pressured in any way, that it would, if they decided to sell, that would be their decision. But as a city, I'd like to continue to support them, because I think they have been a really good neighbor to the entire community. Thank you.
Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. One question, will there be any cost to the city if it cannot use the bank building in regards to construction office? And I know that's a temporary issue right now.
Yeah, the city provided that building to Concrete Works, who's the contractor for the Wadsworth project. So it was kind of a bonus for them. And we've had discussions with Maria D'Andrea about the need for that building long term. She believes it's fine. Foothills would not need access to that building for probably a good year. So Concrete Works continue using it until then. At that point, they would need to find another construction office, and that would be their responsibility.
Thank you. And then the next question I have is, if we were, the whole zoning for the project is mixed-use commercial, correct?
The bank parcel is currently C1, so
C1, okay.
To make this move forward quickly, we've already discussed with the planning department what a rezoning would look like, and I believe Amy mentioned a little bit, there's some deadlines here with Jaffa, and I think we need to have potentially the property in their ownership and rezoned by the end of September-ish. If council gives direction this evening to move forward, we could probably have a rezoning public hearing on September 25th.
Would that, is that something that, and this is just in theory, but I know that the city initiated zoning for mixed-use commercial, also the mixed-use neighborhood. In theory, could the city right now say, we're just going to rezone this mixed-use commercial before the ownership takes place?
We can, but it still has to go through the normal process. So we
Yes.
have to have the neighborhood meeting, we have to go through the posting requirements, planning commission, and 2 readings with city council.
But that would expedite.
Yeah,
some
we
title
could, we could still do it a little bit quicker than if it was privately owned, but September 25th is probably the soonest we can get it done.
And then my last question is I think we'd all probably agree, if we were looking at this corner and you could rate it on a scale of 1 to 4, and 4 being the highest, the corner of Wadsworth and 44th is going to be the number 4. It's going to be the most valuable because it has the most visibility. And the northeast corner, would probably be a 1. And I make that point because, and I'm not against this. In fact, I'm in favor of it, but I just wonder if there's any opportunity, because we're getting rid of the O'Reillys, the Pep Boys, which were sales tax. We have a mixed-use commercial, or soon-to-be mixed-use commercial zone. Is there any possibility that we could have some type of portion of this project really be mixed use? So it would have some type of commercial component, and that it could, who knows, it could even be some type of small employment, or is that just totally off the table for this whole area? And I say it because of the visibility. It's such a visible, high-use visibility area.
Yeah, hard corners are always the best right, the best for retail. I don't think anything's off the table, Mr. Ohm. I think we could take that chance, rezone it, and see what comes. Again, the site is very limited in size and the required parking. So for a commercial retail use, depending on what type of use it is, you're going to have a minimum amount of parking. I think combining this with the surrounding properties allows you to spread that parking out throughout a bigger area. So I think the likelihood of anything very viable coming to this corner is slim. And I think it's the biggest, it's a policy priority discussion, I guess, of what, if you want to support and contribute to an affordable housing project that's already adjacent there, or take a chance and to get a little bit more commercial. I think the southwest corner of Wadsworth and 44th is going to be probably a higher, better use for some more commercial down the road, in my opinion. And then even on the east side of Wadsworth, south of 44th, there's redevelopment opportunities, I believe, down the road.
Councilor Holteen?
Thank you. I'll keep it somewhat brief. I'm excited to see that there's 2 and 3 bedroom units in this. I think we just really need options for families, and I think it's a good use of the site, and I'm glad it's in District 2. And to Mr. Ohm's point, I think if the development wasn't going around it, the site would feel different. But my experience is that I think actually having the site be entirely cohesive and Wadsworth facing and really seeing that type of investment coming in will really catalyze some of the other commercial interests. It's been a little bit of an underutilized corner. So I think hopefully what goes in there actually catalyzes other improvements. And I just want to agree with what Ms. Weaver said. The propane company, they got one of my first District 2 Good Neighbor Awards. They're just a great business, and it's just one of those sort of businesses that provides a service in our community that so many of us need, and it's just wonderfully convenient, and they are just absolutely lovely to work with. So should they want to sell, may they have the freedom and be great partners for that, but I agree, we want to be careful to not pressure them.
Councilor Weaver?
And just to piggyback on that, I just want to clarify that the map that was shown is not current ownership of yours. So last time we had some issues around a map that was put up, and so the map that was put up earlier isn't your current ownership. So I just wanted to clarify that for anyone listening. Thanks.
Councilor Dozman?
Thank you. So it does indicate in the letter that the city's homeless coordinator will be able to make direct referrals. Is there any way that we can get like a first right of like referral? And I mean, this property could potentially sell for a significant amount, but it doesn't sound like it's a great area to redevelop. But I mean, we're talking about $1.9 million that we're kind of handing over, and you're a great partner, and we've supported you, and hopefully that can be reciprocated in having that first right of refusal for our, city and those experiencing homelessness within our area.
Answer that. Lori Rosendahl, CEO, Foothills Regional Housing. The answer to that question is yes, you will get preference on our waiting list, so your referrals will get preference, and we've done that with other communities as well, including Golden, and we've done it in El Rancho for Jefferson County. What we say is we have 30 project-based vouchers at the site. You will get, your folks will go to the top of the list, your referrals, and then we will pull from that list. Now, what we can't do is we can't hold a unit for 2 months while we wait for a referral, but when we get the set of referrals, we usually get them a couple months in advance. And then under the Housing Choice Voucher Admin Plan, what we do is we start to pull from those. So your referrals go to the top. It's the only program we have where we can actually give preference to partners on our voucher program. So we're excited about that. So we will be able to give you preference on those.
So at what point will that be like written into a contract or agreement?
No, I can't write it into any kind of agreement, but it's in our administrative plan. So it is a plan that's approved by HUD. So you'll be able to see it is a public plan, and it'll say right on there for the IVES 2 Wheat Ridge Homeless Navigation Program. We'll have preference on the waiting list. So it's written down.
Is that subject to change at your discretion or the organization's discretion?
Yeah, we could change it, but if you wanted to put it in like the sales contract or some kind of MOU, we could do an MOU. We will also do an MOU with your homeless navigators because that's what we do with anybody we work with. So we will have an MOU just setting out expectations, saying, we're going to provide this many units, you're going to get preference. It'll be an MOU, but it won't be a full-on contract.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a good point. Mr. Dahl reminded me, our city code requires that any sale or disposal of city property besides parkland requires a supermajority, so 6 votes. So we would have to bring back some type of an agreement to dispose of the property, so we could include that language in there.
Yeah, to be an ordinance, because the charter requires an ordinance, 6 votes, 3/4 of, quote, the entire council, and that means 6 votes. So we could use the ordinance not only to approve the sale, but to approve any conditions in one way or another, the agreement, the support of that, or the MOU. I take your point about the policy being enforceable long-term, because I expect that that's one of the reasons that would inspire or motivate the council to say yes, and you would not want that consideration to evaporate later. So I'm hearing that it's possible to find the right mechanism for that.
All right, any other questions or comments? I'll just say that I support this as well. I think this is one of the best ways we can use that. Even if it were cold hard cash, that's one of the best ways we can help our community and the people in it. So I think that's, and especially since I don't think that corner's ever going to generate the sales tax that's going to be worth coming back. So I'm going to ask for a consensus that we move this forward. Excellent. Okay. Anything else?
No, Greg, thank you very much.
Let's move to item number 2, membership
Thanks,
in the
Eric.
Urban Renewal Authority.
Terrific. I'll just turn it over to you. Is that all right?
You bet. You bet. Council, you have a very short one-page memo from me and a draft ordinance with a couple of alternatives in it. Presently, we have an Urban Renewal Authority of 7 members. That's been fine, despite the fact that the legislature adopted a statute in 2015 amending the urban renewal law, requiring it to be bumped up to 13 with 3 members that you don't have control over. Board of County Commissioners, the school district, and all the special districts have to get together and figure out who they're going to put on your urban renewal authority. That was not triggered because it only applied to new urban renewal authorities that were, or urban renewal areas that were formed after the date of the bill, and there haven't been any, but of course those are now proposed. And Mr. Art is here and can tell you what the timing for that would be, because you'll notice that the effective date I've put on and after and a blank for 2023. And we can figure that out, but the kind of the policy call, I think, for the council is, well, if the membership has to increase, how should that be structured locally? I do want to point out that in both of these alternatives, present code right now requires one of the at-large members, or one of the at-large members, quote, may include one elected city council member. It's not required by the code, but it's permitted, and also may include one non-resident individual who owns a business in the city. And that's been useful to the council, I think, policy-wise for a long time. And you can certainly continue that, and either of these two alternative ordinances doesn't change that, but it's kind of about the math. Let me also mention that because this is an authority, you're not limited to the, okay, gosh, the membership has to be equal among council districts, as is true for boards and commissions, where the code, locks you in to 8 effectively. Here that's not true because it's an authority. So you have a little more flexibility there. In order to get to the numbers, and I'll stop in a minute and just take your comments, but in order to get to the 13 numbers, you take, of course, the 3 that you're stuck with from outsiders, and that leaves you with 10. And so how do you do your 10? You can certainly keep the 4 district members and then add 6 at-large members, one of whom could be a council member, of course, just as now. In fact, I didn't change that, and one of which would be non-resident business owner. Or you can switch it around and have 2 from each council district, and then you're down to just 2 at-large, which is true now. So either way, you're able, I think, to reach the numbers. So I'd be very interested in getting your feedback on structurally how to structure it in terms of membership. Then we can certainly work to bring this back to you so that we're in place as we're required to by the law in time to kind of time it with the adoption of a new urban renewal plan. I would also say that we'll probably have to look at the staggering, et cetera, if you're adding members, that's going to affect current members. I wouldn't expect that we do that brain death tonight. That's a matter of putting together a little chart, and I promise you I'm aware of that issue, and obviously no matter what you do here, we'll need to figure out how to do that. But the policy call, at least I believe at the moment, is the base numbers and how you achieve this, the 10 city members. So I'd be happy to answer questions. Mr. Art, do you have any comments on the timing?
No, perfect, Mr. Dahl.
Okay.
Approximately the end of the year.
Okay, so we have a little time.
Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. So I sit on the Urban Renewal Authority Board. And so this is what I think, the direction that I think we would go, and I'll tell you why I think this way. First, I think that the language that says may include one elected city council member should say shall include one elected city council member. And I think that should be appointed by the mayor. And then what we have currently is, of the 7 mayors, is that we have 1 from each district, we have 2 at large, and then we have me, right? And so if we look at how do we expand that, my thoughts are we keep the 1 at each district, and then we have the appointed by the mayor council member, and then we have the 6 at large. Is that right? Wait.
5.
5 at large.
5 at large.
Yeah, sorry, 5 at large. I was reading my wrong notes. And this is why I say that. First off, Urban Renewal Authority has several different funds in our budget. And so it's not just one large fund, one large lump of money that we're in there district for district, arm wrestling over who's going to get the money in their district. There's urban renewal areas in all of our districts. Those urban renewal areas, some of them create a large amount of money that can be spent in that area. Some of them create a small amount of money. And then there's the general fund. And so, for the general areas. So do we necessarily need to have 2 representatives from each district on the board? I don't think it's necessary. And one of the things that I'm concerned about us getting into a situation is where we're now appointing people outside of the district to cover a district. Because while we've been doing really so significantly better at, getting people to, get applications for our boards and commissions, we do still have a few seats out there that are being covered by other districts. And so I think that we don't pigeonhole ourselves in that way. These people would also be a part of our community, minus the 3, right? The county, the school, the special districts. They'd also be a part of our community. And, if one district accidentally ends up overrepresented, just the fact that the way that our urban renewal areas are, it does not create a power pole for one district over another. And so those are my comments on this.
Councilor Weaver.
I am fine with those comments. I am concerned that because it's not a board or a commission and it's an authority, like the Housing Authority, that there hasn't been turnover. And there doesn't seem to be term limits, and it seems like there are several sort of power brokers in the community that are on this and I'm not saying they're not great, but I also think there needs to be opportunity for different blood to come in to these various authorities and to give people a chance to do that. Because, when you go to the boards and commissions dinner, it's a lot of the same faces. And I think we've done some good encouragement of people on boards and commissions, but I am concerned. I would like to, if we're going to do that model, which I am not on that committee, so I don't know. And I take that recommendation. I'd like for us to think about term limits or something to that effect. Thanks.
Councilor Holteen.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I agree with the proposal that Ms. Hoppy's put forward for a lot of the same reasons, and I might depart just a little bit from what Ms. Weaver just said. The Urban Renewal Authority has a specific skill set that's really helpful. And having worked in real estate development for a lot of years, it's really nuanced, and it's much like our city treasurer. Like, we're really lucky when we can get people with those skill sets to really contribute. It's a lot of financial analysis. It's a lot of really understanding complex, financing options. And the districts kind of are, spread across the city, but, they're bigger districts or bigger urban renewal areas in different districts. So I think the district representation isn't as important to me as having the flexibility for the skill set for people who really understand the work and can contribute to it. And I am actually all for talking about term limits for boards and commissions when that comes forward. I think that there's a lot of value in encouraging people to stay on long enough to get into leadership positions, but something like an authority where you actually have some specific skill sets. I think this is one place where I think that tenure really does serve the community. And there's so many constraints around what the urban renewal funds can be used for. So I definitely support the 1 per district with the 5 or the 6 at large, and I also support a shall for a city council member. And then on another topic, when it comes forward to boards and commissions, would very much look forward to talking about term limits there.
Thank you. Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just have a question on how we come up with the terms. So we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, so we have boards and commissions, 3-year terms, correct?
For some, I think, for the Urban Renewal Authority, it's 5-year terms.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And then we have city council, the term is 4 years. So if you appoint a city council person and they're just starting, you're going to do 4 out of the 5 unless they get reelected.
Yeah, and that term, that office become vacant.
Right.
Because that council person, if that council person is not reelected, et cetera, then there will be a vacancy, and you'll have to appoint to fill for the remainder of that term.
And so what, I just.
No different than other
Yeah.
vacancies, short vacancies, remainder term vacancies you have to fill.
I guess I've never asked this question, but what was the logic between a 3-year term and what was the logic, I'm not even saying city council, but what was the logic between a 5-year term? Like, why not just make them all 3? They're all 3. Or 5, what?
I think 5 was initially dictated by state statute. The urban renewal law is in state statute, and I
Okay.
think they set it at 5, and I think we just adopted that, if I remember. Doesn't mean, I think Mr. Dahl's going to
Yeah.
speak to that. I think we have authority to change that, maybe?
Yeah, I
I'm
think.
good with that answer. I just
Yeah,
wanted to know why.
I think we could. It's a matter of local concern. There's no reason, there's no statewide concern about the length of a term of a local appointee, in my opinion. Similarly, you could impose a term, 2 consecutive term limits. That's sort of a classic model out there, of course. Their term limits don't apply to appointed bodies. The Constitution applies them by default to elected bodies unless you opt out in some way, home rule. But you could certainly apply term limits, and I'd appreciate a little discussion on council, because while we're at it, this would be the time, to add that. And while we're at it, we'll have to say what makes terms consecutive. And, someone serves for 5 years, and they're off for how long before they can be reappointed? The default, and then I'll shut up, but the default usually is the terms are not considered consecutive if they're separated by the amount of time of a full term. But that would mean somebody serves for 5 years, then they've got the 2 5-year terms, and then they've got to wait 5 years before they can serve another, so that they will have reached a new stage in their life by the time they're eligible, for that third term, which is fine. Or you can say it's a 2-year gap, just enough. Those are kind of mix and match couple of choices for you.
And yes, I would support a discussion on term limits. Thank you.
Can you use your
Councilor
mic? I just can't hear you.
Yeah,
Do you-
I do support a future discussion on term limits. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Dozeman?
Thank you. I agree. As a district that has had some challenges filling our district seats in some of the boards and commissions, I think that it does kind of get a little hairy when we're making out-of-district appointments, and I think having at-large members will prevent that from happening. I also agree with the shall consist of a city council member, and I would actually like to open the floor for discussion in shortening that term for urban renewal to potentially being 3 years. And then definitely appreciate the comments on term limits as far as boards and commissions, because I agree that we typically have a lot of people that get involved and want to stay involved, which is great, and I love that. But at the same time, we do tend to see some new blood, putting their names in the hat, and I think it's pretty discouraging for people to apply and see that they don't ever get any movement because we're pretty much appointing the same people over and over again. And in some cases, that really allows for us to have continuity in our vision and enacting and carrying that out. But having the demographic shifts that we've seen in Wheat Ridge recently definitely necessitates some people having that opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Councilor Hoppe?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm kind of hearing two things. First off, I agree with Councilwoman Hulteen. This specific set of skill sets that we look for in our community to serve on this authority is, we have experts in the field on this board. And so for us to term limit them out and then to maybe get someone who doesn't necessarily have the skill set to be on the board, I don't specifically support term limits for this particular board. I do support being flexible, and we have a study session item coming up in August, I believe, talking about our boards and commissions. and specifically term limits is part of that conversation that it's going to be coming up. And you know, one that Ms. Scheck reminded us of is, you know, when we're having that discussion and as we craft that, you know, how we decide to move forward with that, we want to make sure that we're flexible so that if nobody applies, that we're not sitting with half-empty commissions and boards because we didn't have anybody apply. So, but also to try to do something with term limits. So I guess I'm hearing like, yes, term limits, but what I think I'm hearing is term limits on boards and commissions and not necessarily this specific item. Maybe I'm hearing that wrong, but what I'm saying is I support the conversation that we're going to be having in August around term limits with boards and commissions, but this specific Urban Renewal Authority board, I don't support necessarily term limits being added to it for the reasons already said. Sorry.
Councilor Weaver?
I'm going to respectfully disagree, simply because a 5-year limit is a long term. And when a person's on a urban renewal committee for 10 years, that's a lot. And while I respect that it's complex information, we have a lot of smart people in this community who often deal in this information. And to Councilor Hulteen's point, I recognize that maybe we need a long-term limit because of that sort of ramp up to understand, to be on urban renewal. But I've had people express interest in it, and there's no opportunity for them to, in the near term to ever get on urban renewal because of the way we this would be an opportunity to bring in more people. So I just respectfully disagree that I think we do need to have some term limits on even committees like this. Because 5 years is a very long term. That's great. We can do 5 years, but then I question whether that's an automatic renewal or if that's something we limit people out after 5.
Councilor Dozman?
Thank you. I would have to agree with the comments that Councilmember Weaver is expressing, and if we're going to maintain a 5-year term for urban renewal, I would like to see a term limit after 2 consecutive terms, and then if it's a period, like a gap of 2 to 3 years, and then they would like to reapply, that would be appropriate. And can staff indicate how much turnover there's been on this board as it is currently?
Not much, very little. People are very interested in what we're doing in the community.
So I think,
Yes, yes.
yes.
Yeah, they have to apply every 5 years. It's not an automatic renewal.
Councilor?
Oh, I just wanted to mention, so I think our newest members are Celeste, Commissioner Tanner, and Byrd, and Commissioner Byrd. And I can tell you that it was hard to find them to add to the board. But, and, you know, I guess we can see, if we're going to be looking at, you know, five alternates, that's 5 open seats that don't belong to the county, the school, the special district, the mayor appointment, or the districts, right? So that's 5 at-large open seats, and we can, you know, determine how popular is it really? But I would support 2 5-year terms with a 2-year gap in between. If that's really, you know, like I can compromise to that if that's really something that the majority of council are wanting to push for.
Councilor Hulteen?
I would get behind a 2 5-year term limit. With maybe perhaps could we have a caveat, like in the event nobody applies for the seat and the person is interested in extending, then that option could be offered to them. And that is a way to dodge getting in a situation where we're having to like land grab for empty seats because we've restricted somebody who's interested in continuing to serve. So it would be restricted if there are new people who would like to serve, but in the event they aren't, then that seat would be offered to the person who's been serving if they're interested in continuing.
Councilor Ohm?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I I think to extend that, I agree with Councilmember Hoteen that we should also, if nobody comes forward, we definitely don't want the gap. But maybe then it could revert to some type of 1 year, because they've already done their 10, and nobody's coming forward. You give it to them for another year, and then see if something opens up. And to try to make some flexibility, because I've sat on the planning commission for many years, and at some point you're kind of thinking like, yeah, I need to step down, but there's nobody else, and if the community wants me to serve, I want to serve the community, and I'd like to believe that a lot of people that are on these, if it's or the boards of commissions, they do want to serve, but I made it very clear to everybody when I was on the planning commission that if somebody else wanted my seat, I'm more than happy to give it up. But there, it was that and the COVID, and I stayed on, but made it clear that at some point it's like I need to transition out of this. So, thank you.
Councilor Desmond.
Thank you. So I was going to ask, I'm probably directed at Councilmember Hoppe, as far as like, do you feel that a term limit would be a deterrent for applicants?
For new applicants, I don't think a term limit would necessarily be a deterrent. And I think if we write it smartly, like the discussion that we're having, where it's, you can serve for 10 years, a 2-year break. If no one applies, then we can apply a 1-year extension and then reopen the seat. I don't think it would be a deterrent.
So then I guess my next question would be for staff, as far as like, what is that language appropriate and legal for us to have a 2-year gap and then an extension? I mean, how challenging would that be to kind of
Sure.
to legislate?
We can write that. There are patterns out there already where you have basically that model with different numbers, but that structure's there. And what I'm hearing is you can serve 2 consecutive 5-year terms. If you can't serve a 3rd term until you've been out of office for 2 years. Correct? That's what I've heard, and that's easily done. And I do think, and I could write it as sort of alternative language, but if no application is received, and you're, then someone who would otherwise be term limited, is what I'm hearing, could then be appointed to fill that term, and I think that's appropriate. And we've got models for that here too, where we've got, if you can't find someone in the district, you can go outside, so it's a similar approach. Am I right in thinking that there's no objection to the keeping the 4 seats within the council districts, 5 at large, requiring 1 member be a council member, so that gets you to 10. The language of the code right now also says that you can include 1 non-resident individual who owns an interest in a business, and I assume that could be one of the 5 at large still. That there's nothing wrong with retaining that. Okay, all right. I've made those notes. I don't know if you want to do a consensus to wrap it all together, or there's more discussion.
Okay. Councilor Weaver, you had your hand up first.
I would like to have a conversation, and so I guess I'm asking for support from other council members, because there's an issue that's with the term limits that we're also sort of touching at, which is we don't have a consistent way or a database of people who've applied for different things and what their interest is. We get them on a scrolling piece of PDF, and I know that Corey and I have talked to people who have applied for several different positions, never heard anything back from anyone. Sometimes it's in the paperwork that we have, sometimes it's not. And I'm not blaming anyone for that particular situation, but there doesn't seem to be a consistent way. I know we've talked about the fact that we keep people's names somewhere. I don't know where that is. And I sort of question if they're being kept, because because we have these openings come up all the time, and it seems like it would be really easy to have some sort of database where we go and see, oh, okay, these persons are on this committee, these people have applied, they did not get on, they're still interested, and then we purge that system. I guess what I'm asking is we not only need to talk about term limits, but it feels like it ends up looking like there's preferential treatment on who gets picked for these various things. And while I realize it's at the behest of the council, It is not a transparent process what the application is for a lot of, at least that's what I've heard from constituents, because they've applied and then they haven't heard back after weeks, and they don't know what the situation is unless someone directly so I'd just like to have the conversation, not tonight, but some other time.
Yeah, and I don't believe there's any preferential treatment of applicants. I think it's probably just the system that's in place. It's not very efficient.
Yeah, I agree.
And as somebody mentioned, that we have a study session, I think sometime in August, and thank you for allowing us to hire a management analyst. He is currently looking at that across the country to seeing what other cities are doing, making this more efficient, so we don't lose applicants. Yeah, that will be coming later.
Councilor Hobby.
Yeah, I just also wanted to say, we hired a young man named Cole Hessep. That's one of his main charges from Ms. Scheck, and he's reached out to me and asked me some questions because of the historical knowledge that I have, because I used to work with Janice Smothers, she was our database on boards and commissions, and when we lost her, we lost all of that, and so it got messy. And I don't know if anybody remembers the old applications we had were terrible. We got newer, better applications. So yes, that is definitely going to be a part of that conversation in August.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, so I just had an additional question around the language of if somebody serves, let's say, in an at-large position and then wants to serve in a district position, will that be okay, or will we still allow or apply the term limits?
My initial take would be, term limits are to get new people.
Right.
And the fact that you're moving from that seat to that seat, you're not new. Now, you can say it differently.
I would agree, but does that need to be spelled out, or is that just assumed?
I think it needs to be spelled out, although it would be easy to do. Okay.
Can we move forward with a consensus, sparing out, or what Mr. Dahl spelled out earlier, where we have 4 district-appointed seats, we have 4 at large, I'm sorry.
5 at large.
5 at large, and 1 appointed by the mayor, shall be appointed by the mayor. We do a 2 5-year term with 2 consecutive 5-year terms with a 2-year limit, or with a 2-year gap, and that we can reapply if we don't have any applications for that spot, we can do a 1-year extension. Do we have consensus on that?
Did you say just 1-year extension?
1-year extension if we don't have anybody to apply for that spot. And then we'll move all other conversation about term limits and stuff to that conversation in August for all the other boards and commissions. Does that answer your question, Mr. Dahl?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Okay. Moving forward, we have staff reports.
Nothing else tonight, thank you.
All right, elected officials, do we have anything before we get out of here? Councilor Dozman?
I know, just one quick thing. Councilmember Hoppy and I spoke, and we would like to have an item added to a study session in regards to the Lutheran Medical Center Foundation coming to present about naming opportunities for the new facility, and hopefully before budget season.
Okay, we'll put that on somewhere.
We'll take a look.
We'll take a look.
Oh, Rachel.
Any other? Councilor Holteen?
Oh my gosh, I forgot this. So, I've been walking around Happiness Gardens. I checked on the bees. They're doing okay, in case anyone's worried about the Happiness Garden bees. This Saturday morning is actually a work day, Many Hands Work Day, to add to the native plant exhibit at Happiness Gardens. So if y'all aren't getting dirty enough in your own backyards, please stop by Happiness Gardens between 7 and 9 a.m. to help the continued beautification and native habitatness of Happiness Gardens, and say hi to the bees. They're doing really well.
Excellent. Anybody else? All right, seeing nothing else, we will adjourn the study session. We will be back in 2 weeks. So have a great 4th of July, everybody. Thank you.